How's it going, everyone? Welcome once again to College Football Time with Avery Miguel. I'm Miguel Mike Medina. This is Avery. Avery, how's it going?
It's going great, Miguel. Another fabulous weekend for college football. Great matchups today, especially the one we're going to talk about. Let's get it.
Yes, Oregon versus Washington. Both teams are 5-0. Oregon is the number 8 seed, Washington number 7. This is one of the most exciting matchups of this week. I see this as a very tight game between both teams. It could go either way. I'm gonna say Oregon probably win by 3, but they're not gonna have it easy. Yes, Oregon has a good defense, and one of their best defensive performance came against Colorado and how they kept torturing Shedeur Sanders. But Michael Penix Jr., he's on a mission. He's on a mission. He's not easy to get to. So Oregon's defense will have to be on their A game consistently from start to finish. All right. Both quarterbacks are having a great year. Bo Nix, he is close to 1,500 passing yards, and he has 15 touchdowns with 1 interception. Penix, nearing 2,000 passing yards, 16 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. This is quite a matchup that I can't wait to see. It's prime time, 3:30 on ABC at Husky Stadium. Take it from there, Avery.
You're right, Miguel. Both teams are 5-0. It doesn't seem that Oregon being an 8 seed or Washington being a 7 seed seems that much. ESPN Matchup Predictor does have Oregon with a 54% percentage, Oregon with only 45. But I do see a defensive matchup more on the running side of the ball. Oregon and Washington, they barely allow 120 yards a piece on the ground. So I see their rushing defense to have a real impact. But let's talk about these quarterbacks. Bo Nix from Oregon, Michael Penix Jr. from Washington. Penix Jr. is from Tampa. I like to represent football players from Florida. Both of these quarterbacks are front runners for the Heisman so far. You also have Caleb Williams at the University of Southern California, USC. But I think this matchup can showcase these quarterbacks and how they're going to then position themselves for the Heisman Trophy. Michael Penix Jr. has a bit of an edge. He does lead the country with receiving yards, like nearly 2,000, and we're not even halfway through the college football season yet. But I think for Penix Jr., the over under has it being 67. I see this as being a high scoring game, even though the run defense is probably going to make the biggest impact. But Penix Jr. and his trio of wide receivers are all back together. Odinia, Rome Odunse, Jalen McMillan, and Jalen Polk. His trio of receivers total nearly 80 catches, nearly 1,400 yards, and 15 touchdowns for these three young men. Penix Jr. is going to be looking for his trio of receivers. They are going to be making the biggest impact. I see Oregon winning and it being an upset, even though they're so close. But I think if Washington wins, it's going to be the upset. In the Pacific Northwest, this is kind of a rivalry that has been going on for a long time. Not a big stage rivalry like Oklahoma, Texas, and the Red River rivalry, but in the Pacific Northwest, you know, football is being a great staple there, especially professional football with the Seahawks in the past few years. But the Huskies and the Ducks, they are making this rivalry, a high stakes rivalry. They're making it a national rivalry that everybody can get behind. And it being at 3:30 on Saturday, a great time to catch this game. I'm going to give this edge to Washington. If Washington wins this game, I see it as an upset, even though they are the higher seed. but I see this game being high scoring. I'm thinking each team scores at least 40 points. I think Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. are going to air the ball out. They're going to take those chances. They're going to score those points. I think that stadium in Seattle is going to be rocking. And I think Washington playing at home, even though Oregon really isn't that far for the students and alumni and just fans to make that trip, but I think Washington wants this so bad. I'm going to give this edge to Washington, but I'm going to say it's going to be a close game as well. I'm going to go Washington 42 and Oregon 40. But I think the real story is going to be when you take a look at these quarterbacks after the game. How many touchdowns were thrown? Were they pressured? Were they hurried? Maybe even sacked? But with the quarterbacks making an impact, those offensive lines for both teams are going to need to protect those young men for the eventual outcome. We don't want a lot of sacks. We don't want anyone hurt. But I see this being a great game, especially in that 3:30 slot.
And speaking of offensive linemen, Washington has a very good offensive lineman, so that makes it even much more tougher for Oregon's defense to try to get to Michael Penix. So, like I said, they can't take their foot off the gas because even though they played well against Colorado, Colorado almost came back. They were rallying, so they can't take their foot off the gas against this Washington team. And speaking of Seattle, that's one of the cities that I have on my bucket list to go. I want to travel to Seattle at some point. I've heard nothing but good things over there. But yeah, this is going to be an interesting matchup, very interesting matchup. And I do think something tells me that it could be a high scoring game because both quarterbacks have been sensational this year. But it comes down to which of these two teams' defense will step up or which offensive lineman will protect their quarterback. So, like I said, it could go either way. I don't blame anyone picking Oregon. I don't blame anyone picking Washington because these two teams are equally yoked.
You're right, Miguel. Both these teams, especially with all the talk about the Pac-12 possibly not existing anymore, Washington, Oregon, Colorado, USC going to different conferences. When we're talking about this defense, it's really interesting because they have really great defenses, but both teams haven't given up more than 32 points. The most points that Oregon gave up was 30 against Texas Tech, and the most points Washington gave up is 32 against Cal. So if this game goes into the 40-point range, the defense are probably going to make some great plays, but it's really going to be on the arms of Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. And I think this is going to be one of those games like last week with the Red River rivalry with Oklahoma and Texas that we just want to tune in. Even those of us on the East Coast, we want to pay attention to this game, especially with these quarterbacks and both these teams making a very good impact, especially in the conference that a lot of talk is that will not exist next year. So we're probably looking at the last Pac-12 champion in the future, but both teams want to play so well. And what better way to do it where everyone can see it?